So how should we start, Kat? Should we start about how we met and how the book kind of evolved from how we met? Because it's this book has been what, about 5 years in the making?
Yeah, I remember, I think when we first officially connected with Shambhala and we first, got our book deal and everything was official, I told my dad, I was like, Dad, guess what? I got my first book deal. I'm so excited. Diane and I are writing a book together. And he said, well, when does it come out? And this was maybe, I think, like 2018 at that point. And I said, it comes out December 2020. And I expected, daughter, you're publishing a book. Congratulations. And it was, why is it taking it so long?
It
takes a long time. Yeah, it takes a long time. So yeah, let's start there. Let's start from the beginning, how we met, how we connected, how this whole thing happened.
I got an email from Kat. I have been an avid reader of Yoga International when it was in its print form, and then when it became in the digital form. In my first 200-hour teacher training back in 2002, I want to say, I can't remember now. We were using articles that Doug Keller had written out of Yoga International book. So I was very familiar with Yoga International from the beginning. And I read a lot of Doug Keller stuff, and I'm a huge Doug Keller fan. I've taken a lot of trainings with Doug Keller. And that's how I was first introduced to Yoga International. And then when you guys went digital, I was on your digital site, and I always thought you had such a well-rounded perspective around yoga and philosophy, and it wasn't always about the asana. And I saw all kinds of different teachers featured on your platform, teachers that I hadn't seen anywhere else, hadn't seen Doug Keller as a kind of like a major fixture on Yoga International. And I hadn't seen something like that before. I've always had seen yoga kind of tied to a particular beauty aesthetic. So that's what really drew me to the magazine, that there was a lot of really good content around breathing and the yamas and niyamas and the Upanishads and the sutras. There was lots of really great content that really spoke to my heart. And so when you sent me an email and asked me if I would create some content for Yoga International, I died. Like, I remember saying to my husband, okay, all right, okay, all right, okay, Yoga International, knows who I am. Like, that was the beginning of so many things. And so we drove out, I live in Ontario, and we drove out to Honesdale, Pennsylvania, to the Himalayan Institute, because at that time, that's where you guys were set up. And you and I met in Annie's studio. Annie is the photographer. Annie Killiam is the photographer for Yoga Where You Are. And
all these photos.
All these photos. Beautiful photographer. Amazing. We had met in her studio and we had hit it off right away because both of us had trained in the Anusara tradition of yoga. So we had a lot in common. And pretty much right off the bat, I think it was your 30th birthday.
It was, yeah.
It was. And right off the bat, we kind of like hit it off right away. And we noticed that our teaching styles were very, very similar. And pretty much, I think 3 or 4 days into knowing each other, we're like, we should write a book. Yeah. And that's how that kind of came about. And we would open a Google Doc and we'd get started and then we'd stop and we'd get started and then we'd stop. And then we'd be like, okay, we'll get back to it. And then we do another like outline. And then life just kind of got in the way, right? And we started doing our own projects and creating a lot of content. And Yoga International just started like expanding and growing and expanding. And your role was growing and expanding and growing. And it didn't happen until about, I think, 2018 when Shambhala Sarah reached out to me and said, hey, are you interested in writing a book? And I'm like, yes, me and my friend Kat have been trying to write this book for a very long time. And that's kind of how we met. And that's just the Reader's Digest version of how this all came together. And we always had like this outline in the background. It was funny when Sarah reached out to us. Sarah's our editor, Sarah Stanton. And I was just like, look, we've already got an outline.
Yeah, I think the outline that we gave her was like a book in and of itself already.
Right? Because we had been at it and stopping, starting and stopping and starting and stopping and starting and stopping. And we really wanted to write a book that we would have loved to see in our own teacher training.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really what we talked about was there's so many books out there that are geared toward beginners that highlight different body types, different ethnicities, different genders, different abilities. But it seems like when it came to finding something that grows with you, something that was maybe geared towards somebody that wanted to explore more challenging poses or explore some of the deeper concepts of yoga or explore teaching modalities and sequencing and things like that, it was still just the same, the same models, the same body type, the same thing. And we weren't really finding what we wanted to see. An example for me personally is my proportions don't necessarily lend themselves to a lot of the traditional, we use that a lot, variations of some of the more advanced poses. But I love, and I know so do you, I love arm balances and handstands and inversions and exploring those. I also know that no matter how flexible I get, how strong I get, if I'm sitting up tall on the floor, my hands are not going to touch the floor because my bones are not going to grow. But that doesn't mean that I don't want to explore those more challenging poses. And so many of us, we all have different proportions. We all have different challenges. We all have different gifts. We all have different things that we're working with. And so the idea that I think we had was, let's look at all of these different aspects of yoga. Let's look at all of these different types of poses, and let's not be dogmatic about it. Let's not tell people how to do them. Let's give people tips and ideas and inspirations so that they can figure out how to make these practices work for them and work for their bodies and their needs and their goals. One thing that you always say, Dianne, that I love and have taken to heart and have shared with so many of my students is you want to not change yourself to fit the yoga practice. Like, you don't exist for the sake of yoga. Rather, you want to be able to take the yoga practice and adapt it for you, make it work for you. And again, your body, your needs, your goals.
And I learned that concept from reading Jessica Char's work, The Heart of Yoga, and watching him speak, mostly on YouTube, and watching him speak about not leaving your students, like meeting your students where they are, but not leaving them there. And that's something, right? Like that's something one of my yoga teachers, Dr. Cale Parker, had said to me in our teacher trainings and all the things that we have done, that we want to meet our students where they are. And if they want to grow, like, there's nothing wrong with anybody wanting to execute poses in a way that's more challenging to their breath or their body. And on the flip side of that, there's nothing wrong with not wanting to do those things, to being content with wherever you are in the practice. So that's why we've created Yoga Where You Are, because you can decide what the asana means to you. You can read the philosophy and you can decide how the philosophy speaks for you and how you apply it to your life, which is what we do with any educational tool. You can, right? When we go to university and you take a sociology course, you go to college or you're in high school or wherever you take a course, how you interpret the course through the lens of your experience is going to be different than how the person next to you, who has a completely different lived experience, different body, different perceptions of the world, will take that same information, right? So it's really important that we allow ourselves to embody that information and to use it in a way that helps elevate us, use it in a way that helps us see the world perhaps more clearly, and and be kinder to our bodies and to connect with ourselves. Because once we've connected with ourselves and we're kinder to our bodies and we're happier in the skin that we are in, we are so much more receptive to the rest of the world. We are so much more able to connect with empathy and see people where they are and be encouraging. I always think about it in terms of when people attack other people on the internet, right? You get trolls on your page for whatever reason. Happy people don't troll.
Yeah.
Happy people who have an embodied experience of themselves don't go looking to make other people feel bad. And I find that my yoga practice and the way that I interpret yoga philosophy through the lens of my experience allows me to see the world in a particular place where I can be kinder to other people and want to help other people.
I think that largely reflects our intention with this book, for sure. And so much of it, we have it divided into sections based upon different types of practices, different types of poses. And we've had these amazing models, or we have these amazing models that helped us out, helped us to pick these poses. And one of the things that we really wanted to show in the book was all different levels of practitioners, all different types of practitioners. So we have everybody here is somebody that we know. That's my husband, Kyle. I know him quite well. He's actually sitting right
He's in the room with you right now, is he not?
You'll notice a lot of the variations in the book use props. And I think one of the things that there's Paige, our friend Paige, she's a project manager over at Yoga International. She's also a former ballet dancer, and she is extremely flexible. And you can tell by a lot of her poses that she
And
is.
she's joyful. Her face is always so, she's always so joyful.
Oh, yes. And she's, again, she has a lot of movement experience, but is also newer to yoga. And she demonstrated a lot of our hip opening poses and their variations. But yeah, one of the things, and I was reminded with DePauli's pumpkin here, is simple yet challenging is a big focus for us, that we like to look at ways, how can we keep something simple, but still insert a little bit of challenge there if you want it. And also, I would say, I think we both love props, but we're also prop minimalists in a way. And that I find that I really love the supportive props like blocks or a wall, but I also don't always have a ton of them available. I like to practice yoga outside a lot, and I might not necessarily bring all of my props with me.
But you're not walking down the street with a bolster and a blanket and a wheel and yeah.
I know. I actually have an eye condition that makes it so I can't drive. So I walk everywhere too. So I really just have what's in my backpack with me. There's some of Diane's beautiful back bends right there. And yeah, so we wanted to look at the ways, how can you support your practice with props without getting overwhelmed by tons of props or feeling like you have to buy a ton of stuff. Like, we have lots of options for variations you can use at home. Like, instead of a yoga strap, if you have a dog, you could use a dog leash, you could use a bathrobe tie. There's the one back bend I do like, which is Wild Thing.
More of a, yeah. It's got more of a side like bend to it. So it's not like, it's a little off to the side of it. So I think it's a little less daunting in terms of.
I think that's why I like it. Yeah.
Back then, yeah.
Yeah, and so we looked at, how can we take this one block and like really work with this one block or this one chair? Here's Dianne doing some great shoulder opening dolphin variations on a chair, on a wall. And those are great preps for forearm balance if you're working to forearm balance, or they're great variations in and of themselves too.
Speaking of forearm balance. Right?
Yes, some variations there. There is a headless headstand. That's one of my favorites, where instead of looking forward like I am in that forearm stand on the page to the side, Dianne is doing variations here where her head is actually hovering away from the floor. So there's no weight on her head. So if you have any neck stuff going on where you're like, no, thank you, I don't want to weight bear through my head, you can still get these great headstandy variations, forearm standy variations. One of the cool things about yoga too that you figure out along the way, oh yeah, shin on a block, that eliminates some of the weight bearing, but you still get a lot of the same benefits. You work the same actions. When you take the weight bearing out of the arm balances, or some of the weight bearing out of the arm balances, at least I find, like with that crow pose variation on your back or that variation on the block, I find I get more abdominal engagement that way.
Oh, 100%.
Adds challenges in other ways too.
100%.
Yeah, Ekapada Kundanyasana. That is our flying splits pose, one that I think we both really love playing around with.
Yes, I as try as I might, that back leg will not float for me, but I am really happy to have the block underneath my toe or my foot on a wall. I just think there's so many fun ways that you can explore asana in your body, and that we somehow get caught in this idea that if it isn't what we consider the traditional variation of the pose, that it somehow, here's the thing that bothers me. Here's my pet peeve, that is somehow less spiritual. You're somehow less of a yogi, if that's what you're going for, or somehow you don't deserve to practice, or your version of the pose, whether it has a block or a wall or a chair or a strap or whatever it is, somehow doesn't hold up to whatever the traditional version of the pose is. And I think we get caught up in that, and we need to realize that yoga is not the pose, right?
No.
The pose is fun and everything. It's what you learn along the way. What have I learned about myself in maybe struggling to achieve a pose that is a goal of mine? I've learned how to breathe through difficult situations. Okay, I'm holding my breath. Why am I holding my breath? What am I feeling in this moment? What's going on? I've learned to build resilience in my body. And I find when I build resilience in my body, it helps me to build resilience in going out in the world. And as you know now, it's very difficult times with coronavirus and all the things that are going on in the world. So what are some ways I can either soothe myself through my practice, or build resilience through my practice. And it doesn't have to be about something that's super challenging or able-bodied and advanced. It can be something so simple as sitting and breathing and being in the pose, right? And just being with yourself and experiencing the joy. I love that picture page so much, which is why I keep coming back to it. Just the sheer joy of just being in your body for a moment.